We're now going to hear from our first panel of the day, moderated by Gregor Fellner, who's the Director of Business Development at Rakuten Advertising. And they're going to discuss the latest developments helping to shape the connected TV landscape, and we'll share everything you need to know about connected TV in 2022. So don't forget, you can submit your questions using the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, and we'll review the questions and we'll put a selection of them to the panel at the end of the session. Over to you, Greg.
Thank you, Ryan. Welcome, everyone. It's a pleasure to have this stellar panel today here and to moderate this panel. My name is Gregor Fellner, Director of Business Development at Rakuten Advertising in Germany. And we are monetizing Rakuten TV, one of the main players in the CTV space here in Germany. We were expecting Clare Ritchie also to join this great panel, Global Head of Programmatic at MediaCom. Unfortunately, due to personal reasons, Clare is not able to join the panel session today. She shares her apologies, but we have enough experts. So I would like to start with Paul and ask him kindly to introduce himself and maybe make a general statement on how he views CTV in 2022.
Thanks, Gregor, and hi everyone. My name is Paul Gubbins. I work for a global CTV ad server called Publica. And what I'm really excited about this year is the increase in application of programmatic technology in TV advertising. I think eMarketer recently put out some stats that illustrated 7 in 10 CTV ad dollars were transacted or fulfilled via programmatic last year. And it's not just those AVOD and fast apps that are attracting that programmatic demand, it's increasingly the broadcasters. And we've seen some really cool innovation in the UK from the likes of ITV around Planet V, and increasingly further announcements from other broadcasters as well, such as Channel 4 and what they're trying to do in the programmatic space. So I'm thrilled to be here today to discuss the evolution of TV, but also more importantly, how we can bring increased addressability to it. Thanks.
Thank you, Paul. Over to you, Sarah.
Hi, everyone. Thank you. I'm Sarah Lewis. I'm Global Director of CTV at ShowHeroes. We're a video, media, technology and content company. I'm really excited to be working in the CTV space right now. I think we're on the cusp of a big shift in user behavior and user understanding, which is going to really drive the CTV AVOD kind of growth over the next couple of years. So yeah, very excited to be speaking with you all.
And last but not least, Jason.
Yes, thank you, Gregor. Jason Demarco, I'm here on behalf of Index Exchange. Prior to Index, I spent about 15 years on the publisher side. And what I'm really excited about is what Sarah and Paul already touched on, which is this transformation of kind of the ecosystem and the monetization and the strategy by which we go to market as publishers and inventory sources. So I'm excited about the technology and kind of the opportunities that are at the precipice and not our fingertips right now.
Thank you, Jason. So speaking of opportunities, and we heard about a lot of opportunities in our presentation this morning. Sarah, what do you think is the biggest opportunity in terms of CTV in Europe?
Yeah, I think there's a lot, which is great. I think the biggest opportunity that I see was very much touched on obviously the presentation we've just watched, and that's the boom in AVOD. Users, as I've mentioned, there's a slight shift in user behavior and actually understanding the value exchange between receiving free content in exchange for advertising. And I think that is starting to change and really give a lot of opportunity to CTV publishers to actually reach bigger audiences and produce more content. SVOD services like Disney and Netflix, they've been in the news and considering these kind of models and will be launching these kind of models. But I think they very much had a stronghold as SVOD apps in the CTV space. And I think that stronghold is loosening. I think we're really seeing this kind of paved the way for more VOD and fast channels to actually really capitalize on this audience kind of understanding now, and audience want for actual free content. And that obviously is good for users because there's more accessibility, there's more content for them to access, and people want a range of content. And also it means for advertisers, there's the chance to reach a much bigger and more varied audience on a very engaging platform. So yeah, so a lot of opportunity across the board, I think. Oh, you're muted, Gregor. Classic.
Sorry about this. I was just wondering if Paul or Jason want to add something to it.
I think from my side, Gregor, and to echo what Sarah was saying, I think it's about discoverability this year. Several years ago, very few people had the will or knowledge to go through multiple menu channels on their connected TV to find AVOD or fast services that they could stream. But increasingly, TV manufacturers are now becoming advertising businesses as well. So they're putting those services front and center, and they're making it very easy for us as TV viewers to discover those services. So I liken the CTV app ecosystem to where mobile was probably 10 or 12 years ago, before the app stores really productized search, and they made it very intuitive for users to find those services. And I think that's the journey that we're currently on at the moment. It's about discoverability, and more people now, due to the cost of living, are proactively searching for those ad-supported apps on their connected televisions.
Yeah, I think Sarah and Paul hit on it. It's the options and access points for the consumer and the viewer have basically exploded. They've become exponentially more. There's so much more volume. And as advertising technology, advertising partners, we're playing catch up. And to Paul's point, mobile, it was the year of mobile for 10 years. So we had an opportunity to catch up. We have not seen this type of growth in viewership and kind of consumer transition to a new medium or platform. It's not unheard of, but like we don't have something else to compare it to. I'm really excited about the opportunity where we're going, but we're playing catch up. Like we've got to find the consumer, we've got to find the viewer, we've got to make sure that we're putting meaningful advertising in front of them. Once again, like mobile, which we had a little bit more lead time, but yeah, we're in the third inning. We're second inning, probably.
I agree, and I think
a lot of opportunity.
Sorry, yeah, I think we have to shift our mindset as well, because as you said, we haven't seen anything comparable, and we can't just take the strategies and things that we were using on TV or digital. We have to actually adapt it to something that is effectively a new platform, and make sure we're not just going, we'll use the copy and paste, that kind of strategy. Again, we have to adapt it to something that is a shared screen. There's different kind of nuances that we have to consider in lots of different factors of it. And I think shifting that and making sure it's tailored to that screen as it grows really quickly, and we need those developments really quickly, is, yeah, definitely.
It's a hybrid approach, right? It's taking the best of digital planning and buying, the best of TV planning and buying, and converging them for this new way of targeting users, because it's still TV. Everybody says, oh, fast, CTV, there must be a lot of education with clients, a lot of education with agencies, but fundamentally, it's still the big screen TV that's in the corner of my living room. But the way we target, the way we measure, the way we attribute, that's what's changing, and that's changing very quickly.
Yeah,
absolutely, Paul. It's still the most engaged, lean back, but highly intentional, engaged environment, right? The viewer, the consumer, the buyer, whatever you want to call them, made a very explicit decision to watch that content. And that content is going to have ads that are not skippable, and they're there, they're engaged. So as long as we make that experience valuable and fulfilling, it'll benefit everybody in the long run.
Agreed.
Yeah, we're actually releasing a research next month, so I can't give too much away, but actually it all actually looks into the engagement of the user and the attention on the screen, all using, you know, eye tracking glasses and electrodermal response to actually understand the brain activity as well as the user's gaze. And the findings you'll be able to see next month, but it is that actually that screen is so valuable when it comes to attention and engagement, and being able to couple that with digital innovation, though there are challenges obviously, but being able to couple that together is, yeah, is extremely valuable.
Yeah, we were touching point base on many challenges already in the catch-up game. And I think one challenge is definitely the data strategy in CTVs. What have you seen in this space? So what are the right data strategies going forward?
I think data is now available to target, but as we're seeing, certainly from a European perspective, TV manufacturers and those streaming services that are launching in Europe from the US are still trying to navigate what privacy looks like. Although there are rarely cookies in CTV, because the CTV ecosystem is predominantly derived from apps, TV manufacturers and streaming apps still have to adhere to the same local privacy regulations. So data is available today, either first-party data or third-party data, for CTV publishers to surface within PMPs. But increasingly, those on the buy side behind DSPs are trying to figure out the best way to engage with users on televisions in a privacy compliant way. And that's why we're starting to see the more scaled deployment of consent management platforms by TV manufacturers and streaming apps to ensure that when they do target their users, they're doing so in a privacy compliant environment.
Yeah, I think there's a good question on that from the audience. Daniel was asking, how do most CTV providers go about obtaining consent to process end user data for the purpose of interest-based advertising, including measurement and targeting? You were touching base on CMPs. Maybe you can comment on this, Jason, Paul.
Yeah, so I looked briefly before I came on. I did a little bit of research on the IAB website, and according to them, there's currently 13 CMPs that are registered for CTV versus 80 plus in the digital space. I think that illustrates where we are on that journey. But to answer the question, a publisher would use that consent management platform and then configure that in line with the TCF guidelines to illustrate notice and choice to their viewers when segmenting them in targetable PMPs.
Cool. I think you have seen, especially Jason, you're in the US, a lot of good success story making use of the user behavior change. Can you comment a little bit on this?
Yeah, I think it's important that as an industry, we don't get caught in a bottleneck around data or privacy and these types of kind of concerns. Yes, that's important. Addressability is important, but let's remember that this is the viewer, and TV viewing has shifted to the CTV experience. Where we've seen a great deal of success on behalf of some of our publisher partners is not just within the original demographics of the younger 16 to 24 viewer, but now it's the older, right? It's the ones with discretionary income. It's the 45 to 64-year-olds that notably are unmeasured by Nielsen a lot of times, but they're also transitioning, right? There's a lot of viewership that's happening in, call it niche verticals or highly valuable kind of segmentation that as marketers, we need to make sure we're taking advantage of that, right? We have the opportunity to target, measure, and serve meaningful advertising. Let's take advantage of it. I think some of the success that we've seen is largely around how the buy side is able to lean into these inventory pools, call them private exchanges, call them kind of one-to-many, or a curated open marketplace. And as the buyer and the DSP can lean in with their buy side decisioning and algorithms, they can now start to pick the meaningful and highly targetable user in real time, which is not necessarily applicable in a one-to-one PG or PMP deal. So that's where we've seen a lot of success. I think there's a long way to go. We have to make sure that we are 100% like strict on the guardrails of compliance and security, and making sure that there's no fraud or bot and so on and so forth. But the successes are coming from high efficiency, improved yield, and super serving both sides of the equation.
Just to add on the data side as well, though, data doesn't just have to be user data. Content data is actually really important as well. So we're starting to see a lot more solutions. We have a semantic targeting solution, for example, where we're using the data around the content, what much richer kind of metadata around the content to understand and target based off of that. And that really is based on how enriched the metadata is. Yeah. So it's not just about collecting user data. I think as a screen, contextual data is extremely important, but it's making sure that the publishers enrich that data as much as possible so that the tools that can target contextually have as much information as possible and then can target with much more nuance and understanding. So I think there's another kind of element to the data side as well.
And I would say that's a really good point, Sarah. A piece of work that we've been doing recently at Publica is to try and help publishers bring increased granularity when it comes to content targeting within the actual streams. If you look at linear TV advertising and take a step back, for many years, it's been very easy for the advertiser to understand what's happening within the show and plan and buy around that and measure around that. But in CTV over the last couple of years, it's been quite difficult to get any real depth of information around what's happening within the show beyond the show name, the title name, or the service that's actually streaming it. So context, we certainly feel at Publica is going to be a major driver of yield for streaming publishers as they activate the tools to give the insights back out to those buy-side clients that really want to start planning and buying granularly around what's happening in the show itself beyond the show name.
Exactly. So having some kind of standardized terminology and things as well being passed in the parameters. You know, it is being done, but not enough at the moment. So that's definitely something that needs to progress. Sorry, Jason.
No, you're fine. I love the points that are being made, and you're right. We got so far in programmatic to target the right person at the right time with the right ad, and we forgot about like the emotional component of it, right? Targeting somebody that's in the right experience, watching content that is contextually relevant to whatever the ad experience might be, still carries a lot of weight. And as Paul mentioned, Publica and Index are working very diligently on kind of like the genre and the categorization of the metadata of the content, right? Making sure that we're able to bypass some of the audience targeting to make sure that the contextual relevance makes sense. A car ad inside of a show or a movie about cars carries a lot more weight than maybe a car ad that has nothing to do with content that has nothing to do with cars.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's also because of the type of screen and the actual viewing experience, because we've got to remember it's not a one-to-one connection a lot of the time. This is it's a communal viewing experience, or it can have your TV in your living room could have 4 or 5 people maybe watching at the same time, or 4, 5, 6 people who use that device. So having data on the use is, you know, absolutely going to be a benefit, but we also have to remember that we can't identify who's exactly in the room. So sometimes being relevant to the content that everyone in that room is watching is another way of tailoring it to the kind of campaign and being effective.
That's strong signals, and it's good that you stressed again that it's a one-to-many medium. And I think there's also another, let's say, a strong advantage, and we saw it in Tom's presentation of CTV, which is the right ad, the execution of the ad, and the creativity of the ad, and the interactivity. We saw retail media. Have you seen other great executions using the interactivity of CTV content?
Yeah, definitely. Sorry, Paul.
No, go on, Sarah.
I was just going to say there's actually been a user behavior change that I think is really driving this, and that's the use of QR codes. Obviously, QR codes aren't new. They've been around for ages and they have little dips and resurgences. But during the pandemic, we got used to using QR codes far more in our daily lives because ultimately we had to as our pass to get in everywhere. And that's now developing into, I was at the airport a couple of weeks ago, obviously my boarding pass and my COVID pass and everything was a QR code. I ate at a restaurant and scanned a QR code for the menu and scanned a QR code to actually pay. That's becoming much more integral in our daily lives. And that has enabled some creativity in ad formats. So we look at the Coinbase ad that ran during the Super Bowl in the US. It was a great execution of bouncing QR code and had 20 million scans of it. We're actually starting to do this in Europe as well. We're running a QR code CTV campaign right now with eBay that is giving an element of enhancing the format, but also convenience for the user and being able to scan and be taken straight through to the product. So yeah, there's definitely advancements in that space.
And I think, Gregor, as well, those advancements are going to be driven by a new type of advertiser entering television for the first time. As an industry, we spend a lot of time talking about transitioning linear TV advertisers into addressable TV. But I think step one for many of those advertisers are advertising on broadcasters' BVOD services, where they can still measure holistically like they've been doing for the last 50 years. But when you look at the growing AVOD and FAST app ecosystem, we're now seeing more advertisers coming from digital, coming from social, DTC advertisers that don't have the same legacy requirements around measurement, but are quick to take advantage of all of the data that's now available on the big screen TV to them for the very first time. So when it comes to measurement and attribution, I think the innovation is really going to be expedited to meet that kind of increase in ad dollars in TV that is going to be slightly separated from the traditional TV advertisers while they still try and figure out the best way to transition from linear into addressable.
I think you hit the nail on the head there, Paul, right? Performance marketing, or what we call DR, direct response marketing, and advertisers in the US that are looking not necessarily for demographic targeting or measurement, but they're looking for the performance. How many people are going to basically convert, call a number, go to a website, and purchase a product? Those types of marketers are moving right now into CTV because they're seeing the downward trajectory of TV, of live linear. CTV is becoming the medium by which they can actually get into the living room, get into that experience that the viewer is, again, going back to that lean back, highly engaged, right? And it's turning the KPIs in their head. They're delivering better performance metrics than they ever have in DR. So CTV, we hit not even our stride, but we took our first step, I think, at the right time, as a lot of these DTC marketers came into the TV ecosystem and found a medium by which they can measure the performance, not necessarily the targeting or audience.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, we at Rakuten TV also introduced into interactive ads just because of what you just said. And we are confronted often with a question that also comes from the audience, which goes that someone asked how you measure or isolate the effect of CTV, addressable targeted viewing, versus linear, and how improved are the effects to offset the far larger input costs. So I think that's also a classical question, comes from TV clients moving into BVOD, then going further to CTV only players.
I think, and I have some experience on the TV side, broadcast cable networks. It is a very difficult objective to measure the effectiveness of an ad in an isolated experience, right? Whether it's a live linear experience or a CTV. I think what we need to start to understand as a marketing ecosystem is that the whole experience by which we engage with consumer as marketers and brands has to be meaningful at each and every touch point. I don't know that, if I'm understanding the question correctly, I don't think you can isolate CTV and the effectiveness of CTV versus linear unless you're going to not run linear for 6 months and only run CTV, turn off CTV, run linear, and then do a kind of disjointed measurement and rolling 6 months afterwards to see the effectiveness. I think it's more about telling a story. It's more about brands and marketers and publishers finding ways to make the user experience, which is for the viewer, the consumer, right? Which is the same person, but having a seamless transition between content and ads and making that non-disruptive. Let's make it fun, which I think is part of what Sarah was talking about with the Super Bowl commercial, right? Make it something that people want to engage with, enjoy, and talk about. But I don't know if the measurement thing is an isolated form. I don't know if that's possible unless you're really going to take a big step in the direction of meaningful research, which is not necessarily good for the bottom line.
I think on that, if you look at what some of the, and I agree, Jason, some of the TV manufacturers now via ACR, automatic content recognition, they have the ability to tell an advertiser whether or not somebody's been exposed to an AVOD and fast ad versus a linear show, because they've got that proprietary technology on their device. It's all privacy compliant. So that's innovation that's coming from the TV manufacturers that are increasingly building those advertising businesses. In isolation to that, you have the broader measurement debate that's playing out in TV at the moment. And there are initiatives that have launched in the UK. One of them is called C-Fly. It's really good, actually. It's got the likes of Sky, ITV, Channel 4 included in that to give advertisers a view for the very first time around what's happening on broadcast, but also broadcasters' BVOD services. But when you draw a line in the sand, it's very difficult for an advertiser to get a holistic view across the BVOD space and the quickly growing AVOD and fast ecosystem. And that's where things start to get a little bit disjointed. So when you look at exposure in broadcaster BVOD versus exposure in AVOD, it's still really difficult to do that at the moment. There's a ton of great innovation, certainly coming out of the US from companies like iSpot. But at the moment, if I was to answer that question or to try and break it down, I would say you've got the TV manufacturers who are really well placed to answer that question via ACR data. Then you've got all of the other innovation that's happening around what the future of TV measurement looks like, to give those on the buy side a better view around reach, frequency, and attribution across all TV, right? Viewers don't distinguish. TV isn't broadcaster, AVOD, BVOD, fast. It's just TV content. So we need to get better as an industry of giving advertisers the insights that they need to increase their spend in addressable environments.
In the meanwhile, we talked a lot about content signals and using more of the content rather than other demographic signals. Someone from the audience asked if it's not better than to avoid targeting age and demographics at all.
I don't think it necessarily has to be excluded. I think it's something that should be considered, but maybe in line with context as well. If you've got a particular kind of channel that is aimed at a particular demographic, and then you also know that there is someone who is that age and demographic in the household, you've got a little bit of kind of reassurance that the two and the likeliness of it being that user. Of course, that gets complicated because layering on strategies, and we would then have to make sure that there's a strong data set as well as strong content data, and make sure that there is then overlaying that there is scale. So there's definitely challenges with that, but I don't think it should be dismissed. I think it just needs to be considered when doing media plans. It can't just be like, okay, we target 18 to 24-year-old males on our standard online video, strategy. Let's just do exactly the same thing. Then it has to be considered in line with the screen and with the content that's on there.
Yeah, I don't think we can get rid of kind of audience or demographic, demo and age. That's the currency, right? It's been the currency for 40 years. We're starting to see a transition into more national addressability, but that's still rooted in like behavioral or age, demo, geo. So I think the currency will, whether good or bad, will still be somewhat rooted in kind of those demographics.
Cool. So I would love to know to speak to you all day long, being time conscious. And also the good news for the audience is we will stick around in the IAB, so you can reach out to us with more questions. But to make the last round, basically, I would like to ask you, what do you see how the CTV market will evolve in the next 12 to 18 months, even in front of the cost of living discussion, especially? Jason, what is your take on this?
Yeah, I think the efficiency of CTV and a lot of what we talked about today with the targetability, the addressability, but also that the yield component for the publisher also is going to actually help marketers. And the cost of living component that you just touched on means as cost of living goes up across the globe, marketing dollars have to be that much more impactful. The ROAS is going to change. So I think we're going to be creative as an industry. I think we're going to be much more reliant on machine learning and kind of technology, and really finally adopt automation and programmatic for CTV. For the last 7 years, we've been taking IOs and putting them into SSPs, and now we're going to actually leverage technology. And that's what I'm excited about. That's where I think we're going in the next couple of 18 months.
Paul, put out your glass ball and tell us what's going on in 12 to 18 months.
Oh, if I knew that, I'd be buying their ad tech stocks right now. I think for me, exactly what Jason has said and what Sarah's been discussing already, it's about bringing increased addressability to TV advertising. I think there's a lot of work still to be done behind the scenes to improve what ad breaks look like. Again, traditional TV advertisers have had a lot of controls over the last 50, 60 years in linear television, and to expect them to transition their ad budgets into addressable TV when there are still difficulties in managing frequency, competitive ad clash, positioning ad pod. The technology now exists to solve those problems for publishers. It's something that we're quite passionate about, and building those solutions at Publica. But for me, it's addressability, it's building better ad breaks that ad buyers will want to target. And then it's that measurement component, really getting under the skin of how that will work and give the buy side one holistic view over their TV ad spend, and not continuing to differentiate between broadcaster supply versus AVOD supply or fast supply, treating TV in its entirety.
Yeah, from my side, I think From a user perspective, subscription fatigue is reaching that tipping point now. People want value for money. And I think they're starting to realize that having loads of SVOD subscriptions isn't essential now to be watching content, because there are free alternatives that are ad supported. So I think we're going to see a huge growth. Obviously, we've been growing over the years anyway, but I think this is a big tipping point from that front. But also, hopefully, that growth is going to, as the guys mentioned, push forward some of the standards that have been, developed in order to make this a better ecosystem. I think as an ad tech industry, we can be a little bit hesitant sometimes, like, oh, we'll wait and see if everyone else adheres to those standards. Then, oh, do we need that one? No, I think this growth and this CTV becoming an essential part of a lot of advertisers' plans, I think, and I hope to see much more adherence to particular standards and much more consistency across the industry over the next year.
Thank you all. We can't end the panel without asking the audience if they have any other questions. So we're still having 3 to 5 minutes to answer them. While we're waiting for more questions, I would like also to ask you, what devices do you think will come up next? There is a lot of device strategies out there, new TV sets from many manufacturers, but also OTT players. What is your thinking around glasses and stuff like this?
I think we're a while away from the Google glasses or something being widespread, but I think there's interesting developments, right, in things like wearable tech and things like that. I personally think that the impact of TV and the lean back environment that it provides is very different to some of the developments out there, and it will have to be very much tailored to the screen. But one thing that I think in the device development kind of stage is, it's really interesting to see something like Sky, for example, releasing Sky Glass. It's something that's been very synonymous with traditional kind of cable, satellite, subscription TV, adapting to the point where it's releasing its own smart TV, Amazon releasing their own TV. I think there's going to be some really interesting developments in that space, making smart TVs becoming the norm, and that being what is released by the manufacturers is pretty much only and standard now.
Yeah,
I agree. The smart TVs, Sarah, have not really, developed or partnered with the wide swath of content partners yet to build out the apps. There's a lot of opportunity still for content to be provided to us as viewers and consumers right through TV. So I think that in the near term is probably the biggest opportunity or change in viewership. The OEMs have a real big opportunity right in front of them.
And I think we'll see a lot of innovation from those TV manufacturers when it comes to retail media capabilities. What does shoppability look like in TV advertising? Again, it's a mechanic that hasn't really been leveraged thus far in traditional TV ad buyers, but we now have the capabilities, we have the data, and I think that will be the next battleground. How does a TV manufacturer or streaming service get a viewer to convert within their environment so they can own the last touch attribution piece? And Gregor, sorry, I didn't mention in my previous roundup, but if there are any viewers that want to better understand how CTV advertising is evolving from the buy and sell side, they should look at the new OpenRTB 2.6 specs. A lot of really cool innovation in that around bringing greater targeting capabilities for advertisers, more controls for publishers. And that really gives you a good overview of where we currently are on that programmatic CTV journey at the moment. So highly recommended reading.
Perfect. Thanks for a little bit of advertising at the end. At the IAB, and I think in each and every company that we are representing here, are tons of good research and also specifications and definitions. The audience is welcome to reach out to us to look around at the IAB sites and our company sites to find more information about this really interesting and precious topic, CTV, the biggest screen in every household, the honeypot, as I call. Everybody wants to take a dip in. And yeah, you will hear more about it in our next panel about measurement and tracking. And of course, more to come at the IAB around CTV. So thank you very much for taking part in the panel. And it's now over to you, Ryan. Thank you.
Thanks all.
Thanks, Gregor. A fascinating discussion, and thank you to our panelists, Claire, Sarah, Paul, and Jason. Yeah, thanks for all your insights, your knowledge. Yeah, I know I'll given have much to think about off the back of that. So yeah, thank you very much again for taking part in what was a really interesting discussion.